Hello, welcome to Bitten. This is our mental health series Bite Back, where we talk to people about their empowering mental health journeys to hopefully inspire other people who might be struggling. Please give us a follow at We Are Bitten on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel Bitten. Thanks a million for watching and see you soon. Today you're going to be talking to us about your recovery from alcohol addiction. So to start off with, really, I guess, when did it start and was there a catalyst?
I think that's a really interesting question to start with. For me, there was no single catalyst. It was something that snuck up on me over many, many years. And I think something I saw in recovery was that people would drive themselves mad trying to find I'm going to inverted commas this, the root cause. Because, like whether it's like, oh, my mum was seriously ill, I had a bad breakup, a relationship trauma. And like, yes, I think all these things can contribute to alcoholism appearing in people. But I think that and this is my opinion, I think that alcoholism it's always there and a life event may unearth it. And I think that people often think like, oh, if I can just deal with my relationship issues, my alcoholism will be cured or my drug addiction will be cured. But the reality is the problem is how you react to things like that, not the thing that happened. So you could get over your relationship trauma and then something worse could happen and then you'll just fall into the same patterns. So like, I wouldn't say that there was any one thing that happened to me. I had a horrendous 6 months in my job that definitely sent me careening off the cliff. But that was 4 or 5 years after I first acknowledged like, oh yeah, I'm an addict. Whoops. Like that was, but there was a stopping point where I was like, oh my God, like I have to do something. But that was very different from realizing I was an alcoholic. It was gradual, I think would be the way to put it.
And if you don't mind me asking, how much were you kind of drinking in a day? I mean, I guess there must have been a point where you were kind of, this is not what a normal person consumes.
Yeah, I mean, it's how do again, it's one of those things that sort of changed over time depending on the situation I was in. So for years, while I was acknowledging my problem, I could still go a week without having a drink and be the better for it. Like my inappropriate drinking started at appropriate moments and slowly sort of extended either side of that moment. So meet my friends in the pub at 7. I turn up at 6:30, have a drink before by myself, and they leave at 9. I go, oh yeah, I've just got to make a phone call. I'll leave in a minute. See you tomorrow. Stay, have another drink by myself at work. And those moments tended just to get longer and longer and longer. These little sort of secret sips where I'd be drinking by myself just to take the edge off or forget about a long day or I don't know, just whatever reason you can ever think of, really, because that's how alcoholics work. Like you celebrate, you commiserate, you pass the time because you're bored, you do it to calm down because you're so not bored that you need to chill out, like whatever excuse you got. And then so the volume I could drink would be, God, I mean, night out, call it 6 hours out. In that time, I'd probably have between 8 and maybe 6 or 7 pints. But then, shots with those, shot with a pint to wash it down. Then someone else gets a round of shots in and I'll have one of those, so it ends up at the end of the night, it's 15, 16 drinks deep. And after years of that, like the thing is that your tolerance gets so high that you need about 6 drinks just to get a buzz that other people get off a glass of wine. And it becomes unmanageable. You can't, because you then start feeling crap whenever you're not slightly buzzed, and it takes lots and lots of time and money to get that buzzed now. And you just get sort of stuck in this circle.
Did anyone ever kind of point out to you before you thought it was a problem? Did anyone kind of pull you aside and say, oh, Adam, like, I think, you should just calm down a bit on the alcohol, or maybe I think you should see somebody, and you were in denial at that point?
Yes. Yeah. Multiple people. At the time, I just kind of brushed them off. You find loads of ways to rationalize it, but there were several key ones. One was I offended a very close friend's wife just after they got married on the dance floor, just after the first dance. The second was a different very close friend sitting me down and saying, I would have made you my best man, but you cannot be trusted. and other smaller conversations added up over a very long period of time. Like close friends going, you should really calm down. Potential relationships ending. There was one conversation in particular, a 2-year relationship, where it wasn't what caused the end of the relationship, but it was finally mentioned in our final conversation, and it really hurt because at the time I thought it was an attack. And then a year later, I realized that was the only person to ever spot it at that point. But the thing is that you just kind of invent reasons why you don't have to listen to people. You just invent reasons why what they say doesn't matter. You know yourself best. And unfortunately, a part of this disease or defect or whatever it is that people want to class it as is that the single core symptom at the middle of it all is that you don't, when it comes to alcohol, you are incapable of making rational decisions. You do not know your own mind the best because it's not your mind anymore. That's kind of where it's centered at, and it just took me years and years to realize it.
So gosh, so it was a matter of years as opposed to months. It was a long period of time.
I'd say between first having a bit of a cry because I realized what was happening to saying to another human being, I need help, was 5 years.
Okay.
Which is a long time.
Yeah. Gosh, that is a long time. And were you at that stage? Were you a functioning alcoholic? Would you say? Because you hear this kind of term thrown around a lot. Oh, I think they're a functioning alcoholic, but for me anyway, I don't really know exactly what that means. Maybe that's what all alcoholics are. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's quite tricky to answer because I guess what functioning means varies from person to person, as does what they're like. I mean, I was living a normal life and I was pretty successful in my career, but I reckon I was 2 to 3 months away from that all flying off the rails. Like when I was in recovery, the people I was recovering with called me Mr. Just in Time. For both that reason and also my health, I was very, very lucky to not have had any long-term, well, there are some long-term impacts, but they're mainly psychological, but like my liver wasn't fried. I was at the stage where I think people I worked with were beginning to notice. I wasn't drinking at work. I might have a pint on Friday at lunch, but I was definitely coming into work hungover more days than not. I was finding it harder to do my work. I was starting to hate my work, not because there was anything wrong with the job, but because it was about 9 hours where I could not drink. And I think that is when you start to resent anything that stops you from drinking, even when it's something as basic as the thing that pays your rent, like that point, your life is not under your control anymore. And I think that was a big thing. But I was, for years, I was, I ran a business with some friends for 4 years. I moved on to a job that I would say was probably further up the career ladder than where I could have necessarily been at that point in time. But that's not to say that once I stopped, it didn't accelerate. Like I realized after I stopped drinking how much I was holding myself back, but I was certainly not doing badly by any stretch of the imagination. But I was a functioning alcoholic who was quite close to not being functional anymore. And I think I could see that cliff approaching. I think that was a big part of the reason why I realized something had to change.
Yeah. Okay. And so that brings me on to really, what was the turning point for you? Was there a specific moment, or was it just a case of so many people had said to you, you've got a problem, and you woke up one day and you were just like, yeah, actually.
Yeah. So, I remember it really clearly. So I had just done a 6-month contract with a company with an option to remain should it go well. The contract was not extended. I didn't want to stay and they didn't want me to stay. And it wasn't because of the drinking. It was just a project that was a nightmare, a role that wasn't right at a company that was very good, but not for me. But it was one of the most stressful 6 months of my entire life. And I dealt with it almost completely alone. And I went to see my mum, who at the time was living in Portugal half the year. So I flew out to see her, and I was only meant to stay for 3 days. got absolutely faced one day about lunchtime at a little cafe around the corner from where she lived. Took the dog for a walk when I got back, and I was just sort of reflecting on what had been happening to me. And I remember I was walking along the side of a little public football pitch, and basically I basically realized in a very precise moment that I was going to die. Like it was really as simple as that. I acknowledged that it had been 5 years since I realized that I had a problem. For 5 years, I had been trying to self-moderate, self-regulate, anything like that. And yet I was getting worse and worse, and the degradation was accelerating. And that I was getting really, really depressed. And I could rationally stand back and go, "You're not depressed, like you're not sad. It's the alcohol." But that doesn't stop you feeling depressed. It doesn't make you able to get out of bed in the morning. And I thought, if you imagine a little graph, and I don't know, along here is time, up here is, I don't know, health, or how alcoholic you are, with 0 being fine and 100 being dead. Like the line between 0 and dead is wavy, straight, goes up and goes down, but it gets there eventually, right? And I thought, like, either I will get so depressed that I commit suicide. That's what happens when depression gets extremely bad. I wasn't suicidal, but I was like, logically, if this is going to continue to get worse and I see no evidence that it's going to get better, I'll get that depressed, or I'll get so drunk I fall off a roof or step in front of a bus, or I get physically ill, my liver degrades, or I get cancer and I will die. And like, I was like, all I can do is make that line a bit shallower or steeper, but that's where I'm going. And at that exact moment, I basically had a breakdown. I realized that, like, there is nothing I can do. I cannot by myself make the right decisions in order to stay alive. And I broke down on the side of the football pitch, walking my parents' dog, and just sort of lay there crying for about 2 hours, with absolutely no idea what I was going to do. And I didn't. It was on top of all of that. I suddenly saw myself very clearly and had to confront the fact that, like, I'm not actually the person that I thought I was. Like, these are bad decisions, and I have made bad decisions whilst sober that have led to even worse decisions whilst drunk, that have in many ways hurt people, hurt me, hurt my family, hurt my friends. Like, and I made these decisions fully aware when sober of the possible consequences. And I've gone, I accept those consequences, to me, my friends, or complete strangers, whatever. I'm having this drink. And like, that happened at the same time as realizing I might die. And I don't know what I thought I was going to do, but I got up and I went home, and I just told my mum. I just said, I can't do it. I don't know what's wrong. Well, I do know what's wrong, but I don't know how to stop it. And that was kind of the beginning of getting into a natural recovery. Like, and in AA, they call that step 1. And I think I was extraordinarily lucky to have got there alone, like by myself. Like, I think that was an enormous luck factor in my recovery, is that's the hardest bit. And that was where I don't want to say journey to sobriety, that sounds so pretentious, but that was where my recovery started. That was the beginning of it.
Thank you for that. That's God, I mean, I can't imagine how you must have felt just lying on the roadside and in that situation. I mean, I've had mental health issues myself, and I know what it's like to feel that low. Was there a particular charity that you called, or did you call your GP straight away? What was your first port of call in your recovery?
So, and I want to talk about this a bit later, actually, maybe, because I'm going to talk about my luck quite a bit, because I do think that my various privileges contributed a huge factor to why I'm able to say I'm recovering. And two things combined. Like one was that I had extraordinarily understanding parents, one of whom is the director in a company who have had to help numerous employees with problems. Like it's a company that involves lots of long distance driving and traveling with lorries and equipment. And my dad had helped several of his employees get help. So one of whom had left the company, and since not because of drinking, because he was now sober, but it just moved on, got another job. And my dad sort of called him and said, you know, whatever you did, it worked. How did you do that? And he was like, well, the health insurance you give us allows us 28 days of mental health treatment, live-in treatment with your work health insurance. And my dad was like, so I have that then, and I have that for my family. And he was like, yes. So with that insurance, I was able to get a position, like the job. I was able to get a spot at a recovery clinic called the Manor in Southampton, the Manor Clinic, for 28 days. So 28 days was what the insurance covered. So that's when I say luck, because I could not have paid that money. A lot of people could not have paid that money. Most people, 99% of people could not have paid that money. You know, it's expensive. And I called them. In fact, my dad called them for me because I couldn't do it. And that was where I went. And I can talk a bit about that later on. But I think what happened to me that was massively important, that was free, because you talked about charities, was in the short term, I had an imminent problem, which was one of my oldest and dearest friends was getting married in 3 weeks' time. And I was clearly in no fit state to be at a wedding. I just had a mental breakdown. And I'm a raging alcoholic who has now admitted it. And I can't go to a wedding, can't do it. And I was like, well, I can't go. And I have to tell her that, because otherwise she'll spend all this money on me and I won't be there. I was like, I can't say I'm ill because it's 3 weeks away. Like I can't go, oh, I'm going to be ill in 3 weeks, so I'm not coming. So I called her up and I was terrified, but I knew I had to do it because it was her wedding and it's an important day. And I was thinking about lying, and in the end, I didn't lie. I just blurted it out. I'm an alcoholic and I'm going away. I'm going away to get help for a month. And she started sobbing and said, this is the best wedding present you could have ever given me. And I was like, you didn't know I was an alcoholic? And she went, yes, I did. We all did, you know, and instead of revulsion or like, I mean, I didn't think she was going to mock me, but I felt that she might be a bit disgusted by me. She might have been like, yeah, you gross alky, get away. And instead she just cried with happiness and support. And then I realized, like, this might be all right. Like, this is not the reaction I expected. This is not the reason I kept this from people for 5 years. Like, how could I have been so wrong? And that, you know, that's denial, which could be its own hour-long conversation. But all she wanted was for me to get better. And I was like, okay, so by telling her, I guarantee that I'm not going to get drunk at her wedding, maybe I should tell someone else. And so I started telling quite a lot of my friends. And I realized that everyone I told was another little tiny piece of insurance against me ever one day getting this wrong. And then the third thing I did, again, not a charity, it was mum and dad, but I essentially placed myself under house arrest with them for a month. Like I mean, this is serious, like no unsupervised leaving of the house. So this is currently still in a small Portuguese town. I knew all the bar owners and all the restaurant owners, and you know, I was a well-known face. I went to every single one of them. I told them exactly what was happening, and I said, I'm barred. Like, okay, I don't think you know what that means. Just, I'm not allowed in here by myself. I don't care if it's drinking or not. Like, even if I order pancetta, like, don't let me in unless I'm with my mum and dad. You know, like, it was crazy. Like, but it was needed because I failed. After that moment, I did drink again. I had one false start. And then it was like, I realized, like, again, I can't trust myself. I have to be told and watched. I just have to find people that know how to stop and do exactly what they tell me. until this is gone. And gone, that was a naive thing to think, but like and eventually I got into a pattern, and I made it. And so by the time I went to a treatment clinic, I had actually been dry a month, which was another huge piece of luck. Like, not many people have a place they can just go and be under house arrest for a month with people watching over them.
Right.
But
So,
that's
I mean,
what
I
had.
guess, I mean, that's amazing that you were dry for a month before you started your treatment, because I could imagine that the people that you were with in this inpatient centre were probably on day one of their journey into recovery.
They were detoxing there. Like, yeah, some of them
Yeah.
were dragged in still drunk. Like, it was
Right. Yeah.
it was a real culture shock going in. That first night was one of the scariest of my life, but not because it was a hellhole, just because I was like, this is real. But yes, like, again and again, I think that comes down to luck and privilege, right? But the graph that I described, like, someone who is less fortunate, someone who can't go to a treatment center, or doesn't have understanding parents, or have a family at all, or friends, right? The stereotypical person that you convince yourself that you're not like, so you're fine, the person asleep on the park bench with a bottle of whiskey on their chest, they're on that same line, 0 to 100, right? Like, fine to dead. They're further along it, but the only and their line is steeper, but the only difference between you and them is like basically luck and time. Like, those, you will move up that graph, like that, that. And that again, that's something I learned, actually, was that I was never different from that person. Just everything else around me was different, but as a person, I was in the same hole as them.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. I mean, do you know any places where somebody that doesn't have health insurance, or isn't fortunate enough to have the money to pay privately, do you know anywhere that they could go? What is their option? Is it going to A&E, first port of call, your GP, a charity? Are there any inpatient centres for people that can't afford privately?
So yeah, there are. And I think I need to sort of kind of explain a little bit about what most treatment centres are.
Yeah.
So most treatment centres are based in one way or another around the 12 steps, around AA. And most treatment centres of a 28-day regime are essentially forcing you to do the first 3 steps. And which is essentially the process of understanding you have a problem and promising to do something about it, but not just saying the words. Like, it's like you do basically like a dissertation on yourself, and it's horrendous. It's a really horrible. You get dissertated, you get pulled apart as a person and put back together, and you emerge like, oh my god, like, there is so much more wrong with me than just alcoholism. But that's all part of why I'm like this. Anyway, all rehab is, for a lot of centers, is like a practice to attend AA. AA is not charity, but it is free. And I will say, it is not for everyone. I understand, I'm not here to do that, but most rehab centers are there because they understand that no one can stay in treatment for the rest of their life, but they'll probably be alcoholics for the rest of their life, just alcoholics that don't drink anymore. So they're kind of, my center at least was getting me ready for AA. I still go, not as much as I used to, and probably not as much as I should go to AA, but like, I have absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that it, along with that initial treatment, saved my life. But the first piece of advice I'd give to someone who's struggling would be not necessarily go to an AA meeting. There are other places you can go, but find someone else, another human being, and tell them what is wrong with you. I think the best person that would be another addict, because they would understand automatically, without knowing anything else about you. They would know probably the most important thing about you, which is how what's wrong with you and how that makes you feel. But find someone who's done it and ask them how they did it. Like, it's kind of as simple as that, if you want to be really reductive. There are I'm aware of charities, and that those charities exist to help get people into treatment centers. But I'm not sure, and there are lots of charities that do things like education and things like that, but I'm not that aware of them. So for me, all I've done in the 5 years since I left treatment is AA occasionally, but I say all I've done. You build a network from doing this. You make friends and contacts and get a bunch of addicts supporting each other whenever they need it.
Did you have any kind of mentor? Because I know some of these centres, you have a recovered mentor that helps you. And it's something that I do because I had anorexia when I was younger, and I am now a mentor to people on their recovery journey. Is that something that's similar to what you have at AA?
So AA, you have what is called a sponsor.
Right.
And on TV, a sponsor is, someone that it's always the guy, the hero of the show calls like, oh, Bill, I need to drink. Oh, Tom, don't drink, you Wally. And that's not quite how it actually works, is that generally you get a sponsor to work the steps. And so the 12 steps can fit on the back of a credit card. They're very short little things. But actually what working the steps is essentially doing like written homework about yourself. Like the 12 steps themselves can contain many steps and lots of questions you have to answer and fill out. And it's like a degree in you that your sponsor administers and helps you do. So you don't really find out how AA is going to fix you really, or like how it's going to try, until your sponsor starts helping you with the steps. And that's when it really becomes, you suddenly realize what it is. It's not just 12 platitudes on the back of a bit of paper. And so, yeah, sponsors exist in that sense. And at that point, you can engage or disengage as much as you like. Like, I think with me, I'm very light touch with recovery now. Like, I made a promise to myself at the beginning of this process, like I will find someone who has done it, got sober, and I will do everything they tell me for a year. Every single thing, even if I think it's stupid, like, certain things like yoga. I'm not a yoga person. I don't think yoga is stupid. I feel stupid doing yoga. Did it for ages, like just because he's like, it helps me. And it's like, fine, maybe it'll help me. I'll do it. It doesn't matter how silly I feel. Or, like they said you shouldn't go to the cinema because it has a bar. And that sounds ridiculous. But I listened, I did it, and there are hundreds and hundreds of little rules like that. And that helped. And then once you've been sober a while, you can kind of just discard the rules that you don't need anymore. And there's nobody checking a register when you go to AA, or there's smart recovery, which is a alternative sort of thing. Like, nobody's sitting there giving you a bad grade if you don't attend enough. Like, it's all down to you. You can take as much of it. I mean, one of the things they say a lot is take what you need, leave the rest. And yeah, you can do that with experience. But I would suggest that what people do, they do it all at the beginning to figure out what it is that resonates with them. And whether that means doing everything someone at AA tells you, or trying 8 different recovery methods, just literally don't leave any stone unturned is probably what I'd say from them.
Yeah. This might be a question, a silly question, but I know that it's probably a question that people have in their minds when they don't know much about alcoholism. But I'm guessing if you have been an alcoholic, you are always an alcoholic, in a sense that you can't drink again. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Or
I'm pretty sure it's true for me.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to, let me put it this way, I wouldn't want to risk testing it. I know that for 15 years of my life, if I had one drink, I'd have 10, right? And I knew that for 5 of those years, I was very aware of that, and yet I couldn't stop it. And I think there's this very dangerous little voice in the back of any addict's head. And I think especially after you've been in recovery a while, like you say you're 3 years in and you're like on cloud 9, like, oh my God, I'm sober, it's amazing. And then like a little voice in the back of your head goes, yeah, this is easy, isn't it? Like, maybe you're not an alcoholic. Maybe you could just have a drink, and you'll be fine because this is easy. And honestly, like, one of the huge things that is valuable about going to any sort of recovery place, whether it's SMART or AA or anything, is you meet people that relapse. And all their stories, practically all of their stories, start the same way. which is like, I was doing really well. And then I thought, well, maybe I can control it. And that it's every time. Like, yeah, sometimes it's, oh, I had a fight with my girlfriend, or, you know, that does happen. Like, you know, that people do get triggered by triggering events. But if it's not that, it's that little voice just going, "Oh, you're fine. I think you're fine." You've taken, and you know, there are people, I think, that do go back to drinking and do learn to moderate. But I don't know. I consider myself someone who considers evidence and thinks about things rationally. All previous evidence that I know about myself points to that if I had a couple of drinks, I'd be right back where I was straight away. So for me, I think I am an alcoholic, not I was. You know, I don't drink and I haven't for 5 years, but I just don't think I ever can again. Maybe one day they'll make an amazing wonder drug that means I can. But for now, I'm quite happy as I am.
You said that you wanted to talk about the Manor Centre a bit more. Is there this was the place that you had your treatment, the 28-day treatment? Was there anything more that you wanted to talk about there?
What a lot of these centres do is teach you, essentially try and move you through the first 3 steps, and that is essentially you acknowledging a problem, realizing you can't deal with it alone, and that your life is becoming unmanageable, and then essentially giving your decision making over to someone else for a while until you can sort yourself out. And like I mentioned, I was lucky enough to go in there, like basically having done step 1 and pretty much step 2. But a lot of people haven't. And I think that the variety of people I saw in that place, like, so some people in there had actually gone in there with some sort of like assistance, like council grants or things like that. So you actually did have a wide variety of people. You know, and the way they deal with denial is very different. And the one thing about being locked in a place for a month is that people can, well, not beat it out of you, but like drum into you that you're not necessarily something completely unique, that anything that you think they've seen 1,000 times. And I think that one of I probably was in there were only ever 12 people at a time, but I was probably in there with about 30 people over the course of the month. And I think what shocked me was how utterly boilerplate and average I was in terms of my disease, my condition. I kind of felt like I have a unique take on life. Like, nobody sees things the way I do. Like, what's happening to me is not something anyone else can understand. And then you just get in there, you're like, oh my God, I'm so average. Like, I'm so predictable. And then people come in after you with that mindset, and you just start rolling your eyes like, oh, here we go, mate. And I think that this idea that this is an unspeakable thing that can't be discussed, or an untreatable thing that can't be fixed, fixed, it's not maybe the right word, but like treated, or it can't be, no one can ever understand you. And it's like, they don't have to understand you, they just need to know that you're an alcoholic. And I just think seeing that there was, so then you've got this sort of spectrum of people like me who come in and go, I am a scientific person, I look at rational evidence, and I don't believe in these random words in the 12 steps and all these mentions of God, and, you know, I'm not religious, I don't think this is for me. But I found a way to rationalize what I was doing. I don't believe in a metaphysical God, but I believe in a metaphorical God, like in a sense of what is defining me and who I am and why I do things the way I do. And I began to see patterns in the things that we were doing, and I began to realize the psychological elements of where you know, the psychological elements of what we were doing every day in therapy, essentially. And I began to realize, like, okay, so this actually does make rational sense, because basically, at the end of the day, this gets people sober, at least some people. So there's got to be something in here that works. So why don't I try and figure out why that is if I don't believe in X, Y, or Z? So that was my approach. On the other end, you have people who actually were incredibly spiritual, people who like clasped rosary beads as they said, the serenity prayer in the morning. And it was their faith that actually ended up propelling them to sobriety, working from the same, it's because they hymn sheet, but that seems inappropriate, like the same set of steps as me. And despite all of us being different, our problem was all the same. Nothing was really unique about any of our story. I mean, our stories are all personal to us in terms of when you share your life, but as in, there's nothing there that these people haven't seen a million times before, the people who are treating you. And I think seeing that kind of spectrum from people who are very spiritual through sort of new age, somewhere in the middle, and then very like left-brained, like rational thinkers over here. I mean, they're not that rational, they're alcoholics, but you know what I mean? The people who need to see science in the solution. And they all found a way of understanding why this thing works for people, or why speaking to another addict is so important, or realizing that their problem isn't some unknowable thing that no one's ever experienced before, because there are so many people that are going through all the same things, even if the specifics are different. Yeah. And I think that was the most important thing I learned in rehab. It wasn't really any of the lessons they taught. It was more like, God, we're all pretty much the same, just with different ways of understanding what we're doing. And I think that made me feel less alone, was kind of the point I was getting to. Like, this is not something that I have to deal with by myself. There are people who know what I should do, even when it's not me, because I'm cuckoo sometimes, you know. So that was important. That was kind of where I was getting at.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay. Amazing. And just finally, we talk about mind food a lot in Bitten, just things that I guess make you feel good when you're having a down day, or a quote that you live by.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's mega important is to find things that make you happy and do them loads, right? Like, I love music, and there was a period of about 4 or 5 years where I just kind of forgot music, like, and not just listening to it, but discovering it. I think it was when I got my Spotify Wrapped, you know, at the end of, I think it was 2015, which was round about the time when I was at my worst, and it was the same more or less list as it was in 2011 and 12 and 13. And yeah, I was just like, I'd lost that joy. Like, that's depression, isn't it? But like, you know, it was, and rediscovering music and finding new music and singing in the shower is amazing. I think reading, excellent. I think all my little nerdy hobbies that I was kind of like kept on the DL back in the day, now I've fully embraced. Like, you know, I love my PlayStation, and I know that sounds really stupid, but it's pure escapism. And what I've realized, especially in lockdown, but even before, is like, well, frankly, at the end of a long day, when it's Friday and we've all worked God knows how many hours, everyone else can just have a beer and unwind. I can't. And I was, you know, sometimes I resent that, but it doesn't make me want a beer, but I don't feel good about it. But I do have things that I can do to unwind, and I just do them, and just keep those things close to hand, and just make sure you make the time. And I think that is probably the most important thing, rather than the hobby itself, is like, I fiercely guard my alone time. Like, no matter what I am doing, I will have an hour or an hour and a half before bed where I can just do something. I will, you know, it's, whether it's a social engagement, whether it's work, whether it's just sitting with mates, I just will not, I cannot be at work all day, then with friends for 5 hours, then straight to bed, because I wake up in exactly the same state I was the night before, which is like, you must have that time, and you must protect your mental health. And it's even more important to protect an addict's mental health than non-addicts, because if you start spinning out of control, the consequences are so much darker.
Well, Adam, thank you so much. It's been incredible. I'm sure there is going to be a lot of people that watch this and might have been or going through a similar situation to you, and this really helps them. So I really appreciate you being so open and honest about your recovery. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.